I didn't find out my home was sold from my children. I found out from a stranger standing at my gate, holding a folder, wearing a polite smile, asking me what date I planned to move out. At first I laughed because the sentence didn't make sense in any logical way. How could my home be sold when my bed was still warm inside, when my clothes were still in the closets, when my dishes were still drying in the kitchen, when my photographs still covered the walls, when my life was still breathing inside that house? The man looked uncomfortable when I laughed, the kind of look people get when they realize they've walked into something they don't understand. He checked his papers again, cleared his throat, and calmly said my son's name, then my daughter's name. That was the moment the laughter died in my chest and turned into something cold and heavy. Not fear. Not anger. Silence. A deep, hollow silence that spreads when your reality collapses without making a sound. The house behind me was built from 38 years of work. Double shifts, overtime hours, night jobs, back pain, missed holidays, cold mornings, tired hands, and endless sacrifice. I raised 2 children in that house alone after their father died. I worked, cooked, cleaned, cried in private, stayed strong in public, and built a life that revolved around them. Every wall held memories. Every room carried years of voices and laughter and arguments and forgiveness and love. That house wasn't property to me. It was my history. It was my body. It was my life. Slowly, quietly, betrayal had entered my home without force. My son started visiting more often, but not to sit with me, not to talk, not to ask how I felt. He checked drawers, asked about documents, spoke about planning. My daughter started using strange words like future arrangements, legal preparation, security, assets, and responsibility. They brought papers and folders and forms, and I signed them because I trusted them, because they were my children. They told me it was for my protection, that it was just paperwork, just formalities, just preparation in case something happened. Nothing felt dangerous. But the house began to feel unfamiliar. Locks changed. Mail disappeared. Neighbors started acting strange. Cars slowed down outside. People took pictures of my gate. And then the man came with his papers and his polite voice and his calm certainty, telling me my house was already sold. That night I cooked dinner like nothing happened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them immediately. I watched them talk about renovations, investments, business plans, new cars, future opportunities, and our future. Not once did they say my name. Not once did they ask how I felt. Finally, I asked one simple question. Who did you sell my house to? The silence at the table was heavier than any argument. My daughter said I was being dramatic. My son said it was just business. Business. That's what my life had become. They told me I was old, that I didn't need so much space, that they were planning for me, that they would put me somewhere nice, a care facility, assisted living, a smaller place. They had already decided my future without me. They didn't know one thing. 10 years earlier, after my husband died, after watching families destroy each other over property, I protected myself quietly and legally. The house was placed in a protected trust with lifetime residency rights. It was never legally theirs. The signatures they used were fraud. The sale was illegal. The contracts were invalid. When the lawyer arrived, when the authorities arrived, when the registry confirmed it, the truth collapsed on them like a wall. They hadn't sold my house. They had exposed themselves. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, financial exploitation, identity misuse, criminal charges, real consequences. My son cried. My daughter begged. They said they were just trying to help. They said they were family. But family does not erase crime. Love does not justify theft. Blood does not excuse betrayal. They lost everything that day: trust, reputation, security, future. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I didn't feel joy. I just sat in my chair, in my home, in my life, and breathed. Because survival is not revenge. Dignity is not cruelty. And sometimes choosing yourself is the bravest thing you will ever do. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. But they forgot one thing. I built this life. I built this home. I built this family. And I will not be erased by the people I once carried in my arms. The silence after everything happened didn't feel empty. It felt clean. Like air after a storm has passed and broken the heat. My house no longer felt heavy. Felt like it could breathe again. For the first time in months, I slept without fear of footsteps in the hallway, without listening for whispers, without wondering what papers were being signed behind my back. The walls felt like mine again. The doors felt safe again. The air felt honest. But healing doesn't come as peace immediately, it comes as memories first. I started remembering small things, moments I ignored, red flags I explained away, conversations I pretended not to hear. The way my son used to look at the house before he looked at me. The way my daughter spoke about my age like it was a disease. The way they discussed my future like it was already finished. I realized the betrayal didn't start with the sale. It started with entitlement. It started the moment they stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. People don't wake up one day and become cruel. They grow into it slowly, comfortably, quietly. Especially when greed is fed and never challenged. Days passed, then weeks. Investigations moved forward. Lawyers called. Officials came. Documents were filed. My name was no longer spoken with pity, but with respect. My story moved through offices and departments, not as gossip but as a case. A lesson. A warning. Elder abuse is quiet, hidden, polite, and often dressed as care. People think violence only looks like bruises, but sometimes it looks like paperwork, signatures, and smiles. Sometimes it looks like children saying, "We're helping you." Sometimes it looks like love wearing a mask. My daughter tried to call. My son tried to send messages. I didn't answer. Not out of hatred. Not out of revenge. But out of clarity. Some doors must stay closed not to punish others, but to protect yourself. Forgiveness is a choice. Access is a privilege. I chose peace. I chose distance. I chose life. I started planting flowers again in the garden. I painted the fence. I fixed the broken step. I opened windows. I cooked meals for myself slowly, without rushing, without fear. I sat in my living room and listened to silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't threaten you. Neighbors started stopping by again. Friends returned. Laughter returned. Life returned. My home became a home again, not a battlefield. And sometimes late at night, I would sit with a cup of tea and think about how close I came to being erased quietly, legally, politely by the people I loved most. No violence. No screaming. No crime scene tape. Just signatures and contracts and plans. A living funeral. A soft burial. A clean removal. And I understood something important that I wish every person understood before it's too late. Love without boundaries becomes permission. Trust without awareness becomes vulnerability. Family without accountability becomes danger. Not every betrayal comes from strangers. Some come from the people who know your routines, your weaknesses, your habits, your fears, your kindness. Some betrayals come wrapped in familiar voices and childhood memories. But survival is not about bitterness. It's about courage. It's about choosing yourself even when it feels unnatural. It's about understanding that being a parent does not mean being a victim. Being old does not mean being powerless. Being kind does not mean being foolish. And being loving does not mean being blind. I am not angry anymore. I am not broken. I am not bitter. I am awake. I am alive. I am still here. I walk through my house and feel its heartbeat match mine. I touch the walls and remember the years, the pain, the work, the love, the sacrifice. And I smile not because I won but because I survived. They thought my life was over. They thought my story was finished. They thought my house was already theirs. But I am still breathing in it. Still living in it. Still building in it. Still healing in it. And as long as I am alive, my story is not theirs to write. My home is not theirs to sell. My life is not theirs to plan. My future is not theirs to decide. I am not a burden. I am not an asset. I am not a problem to solve. I am a woman who built a life from nothing and refused to be erased by the people she once carried in her arms. Time has a strange way of changing pain into clarity. Not softening it, not erasing it, but organizing it, turning chaos into understanding. I began to see my life not as a story of betrayal, but as a story of survival. Not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. The house stopped feeling like a place of fear and started feeling like a sanctuary again. Mornings returned to being quiet instead of tense. Nights returned to being calm instead of watchful. I woke up without dread. I slept without anxiety. I moved through my home without the feeling of being observed, measured, evaluated. For the first time in years, I belonged to myself again. Sometimes I would sit in the living room and think about my children when they were small, about scraped knees and school plays and bedtime stories, and the way they used to fall asleep on my chest. And I would ask myself the hardest question any parent can ask. Where did I lose them? Where did love turn into entitlement? Where did care turn into control? Where did protection turn into possession? And I understood something painful but freeing. Some people don't become cruel because they are evil, they become cruel because they are never taught limits. They are never taught that love is not ownership. That care is not control. That family is not permission. My children were never taught boundaries because I thought love was enough. I thought sacrifice was enough. I thought kindness was enough. I thought giving was enough. But love without structure creates hunger, not gratitude. It creates expectation, not respect. Creates entitlement, not loyalty. The investigation continued quietly in the background. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. That chapter wasn't mine anymore. My chapter was healing. My chapter was living. My chapter was rebuilding my sense of self after years of slowly being erased. I started walking in the mornings. I joined a small community group. I laughed again. Real laughter, the kind that comes from your stomach, not the polite kind you use to survive. I started telling my story to other women, and I realized how common it was. How many mothers were being financially controlled. How many elderly parents were being manipulated. How many families were stealing quietly, politely, legally. How many people were being erased while still alive. And I understood that my story wasn't unique, it was just visible. And visibility matters. Because silence protects abusers more than it protects victims. I stopped being ashamed. I stopped hiding. I stopped protecting people who never protected me. I chose truth. I chose dignity. I chose myself. And one day, months later, I stood in my kitchen making tea, sunlight pouring through the window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace without fear attached to it. Not the fragile peace that depends on other people behaving well. Not the conditional peace that requires silence. Real peace. The kind that comes from safety, from ownership, from autonomy, from self-respect. I realized I wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. I wasn't waiting for explanations. I wasn't waiting for redemption. I wasn't waiting for closure. Because closure isn't something others give you. It's something you give yourself when you decide to stop reopening the wound. I forgave them quietly, not to restore them, but to release myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean trust. It means freedom from carrying their poison inside your chest. I forgave them and closed the door. Permanently. My home stayed mine. My life stayed mine. My future stayed mine. And slowly, gently, I began to feel young again. Not in my body but in my spirit. I felt curiosity return. Hope return. Desire return. Dreams return. I started planning again, not for death but for life. Trips. Projects. Learning. Growth. Joy. I became more than just a survivor of betrayal. I became a woman rebuilding herself. And I learned the deepest truth of all. Sometimes the greatest betrayal becomes the greatest liberation. Because it forces you to see clearly. It forces you to choose yourself. It forces you to grow. It forces you to become whole again. I am not broken. I am not bitter. I am not lost. I am not finished. I am still here. Still standing. Still living. Still choosing myself. Still writing my own story. Still building my own peace. And if there is one truth my life now carries, it is this. No one gets to erase you quietly. No one gets to sell your life behind your back. No one gets to decide your worth without your consent. No one gets to plan your ending while you are still breathing. As long as you are alive, your story belongs to you. Your home belongs to you. Your future belongs to you. Your life belongs to you. And anyone who tries to take that from you isn't family. They are just thieves with familiar faces. And as the months turned into a year, something unexpected happened inside me. Not closure, not forgetting, but strength. A quiet, solid strength that didn't need anger to survive. I stopped waking up thinking about what they did and started waking up thinking about what I would do. I filled my days with purpose instead of memory. I filled my mind with plans instead of pain. I stopped measuring time by betrayal and started measuring it by growth. My house became more than a symbol of survival. It became a space of rebirth. I changed the furniture, repainted the walls, moved the pictures, rearranged the rooms, not because the house was broken, but because I was becoming someone new inside it. A woman who no longer lived in fear. A woman who no longer apologized for existing. A woman who no longer confused love with sacrifice. A woman who understood that self-respect is not selfishness. Some nights I would sit on the porch and watch the streetlights glow, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood, and I would think about how close I came to losing everything without a single scream being heard. No bruises. No broken bones. No hospital beds. Just paperwork, manipulation, silence, and signatures. The cleanest form of violence. The kind that leaves no scars on the skin but fractures the soul. And I understood how dangerous politeness can be when it's used as a weapon. How calm voices can destroy lives. How smiling faces can hide knives. How family can become the most efficient predators because they know exactly where to strike without making noise. I began speaking at community meetings, senior centers, support groups, churches, women's circles. I told my story not as a victim but as a warning, not as a tragedy but as education. I watched other women cry as they recognized themselves in my words. Mothers, grandmothers, elderly fathers, retired workers, people who had built lives and were slowly being erased by their own families. And I saw something powerful happen, fear turning into awareness, silence turning into courage, confusion turning into clarity. My pain became purpose. My betrayal became protection for others. My story became a shield. And that's when I realized something profound. Evil doesn't fear anger, it fears exposure. It fears truth. It fears light. It fears voices. It fears awareness. It fears people who stop being ashamed. I was no longer ashamed. I was no longer quiet. I was no longer small. I was no longer invisible. I was present. I was loud in my truth. I was steady in my boundaries. I was firm in my dignity. I didn't hate my children. I didn't curse them. I didn't seek revenge. I simply removed them from my life and reclaimed my own. Sometimes people confuse mercy with weakness, distance with cruelty, boundaries with bitterness. But boundaries are not walls, they are doors you control. And I closed mine. Not violently. Not dramatically. Not publicly. Quietly. Permanently. Peacefully. The greatest revenge is not destruction. It's survival with dignity. It's healing. It's growth. It's joy. It's freedom. It's living well. It's building a life so full that the past no longer has space to live in it. I am not haunted by what happened anymore. I am informed by it. I am wiser because of it. I am stronger because of it. I am alive because of it. I look at my house now and I don't see betrayal. I see resilience. I see endurance. I see history. I see survival. I see a woman who refused to disappear quietly. A woman who refused to be erased politely. A woman who refused to be buried legally while still breathing. I am that woman. And I will always be that woman. Because this house is not just a building. It is a witness. A witness to love. A witness to sacrifice. A witness to betrayal. A witness to survival. And now a witness to peace. I walk through my rooms and I feel whole. I sit at my table and I feel safe. I sleep in my bed and I feel secure. I live in my life and I feel free. And that freedom is the most powerful thing I have ever owned. Not money. Not property. Not documents. Not protection. Freedom. The freedom to exist without fear. The freedom to trust myself. The freedom to choose my peace. The freedom to say no. The freedom to walk away. The freedom to live. And as long as I am alive, no one will ever write my ending for me. No one will ever sell my life behind my back again. No one will ever decide my worth. No one will ever plan my disappearance. Because I am not done. I am not finished. I am not fading. I am not weak. I am not silent. I am still here. Still breathing. Still standing. Still choosing myself. Still living in my home. Still writing my story. Still walking forward. Still free. And life, once it settled into its new shape, began to feel simple in a way I had forgotten was possible. Not easy, not perfect, not free from sadness, but honest. Real. Clean. I woke up each morning without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. I moved through my days without checking over my shoulder. I answered my phone without anxiety. I opened my door without suspicion. Safety returned in small, quiet ways. The kind you don't notice until it's gone. The kind you only appreciate when you get it back. I started doing things just because they made me happy, not because they were useful, not because they were productive, not because they served someone else. I read books slowly. I watched old movies. I baked bread. I listened to music loudly. I let myself rest without guilt. For most of my life, rest felt like weakness, like laziness, like failure. Now it felt like healing. I stopped proving my worth through suffering. I stopped measuring love through sacrifice. I stopped believing that pain was the price of belonging. I learned that peace is not something you earn. It's something you allow. Sometimes I would walk through my neighborhood and notice things I had never seen before. The shape of the trees, the sound of birds, the rhythm of footsteps, the way sunlight moved across walls. It was as if my eyes had been closed for years and were finally opening. Trauma narrows your world. Safety expands it. And my world was expanding again. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. And there is a difference. Survival is tight and small and careful. Living is open and wide and curious. Survival whispers. Living breathes. Survival hides. Living stands. I stood. I took up space again. I spoke without fear. I laughed without restraint. I loved without self-erasure. I no longer needed to be needed to feel valuable. I no longer needed approval to feel real. I no longer needed permission to exist. I belonged to myself. That became my identity. Not mother. Not victim. Not survivor. Woman. Human. Whole. One day I found an old photo album in a drawer. Pictures of my children when they were young. Smiling. Innocent. Safe. And for the first time I didn't feel pain when I looked at them. I felt acceptance. I felt sadness, yes, but not suffering. I felt compassion without attachment. Love without illusion. I understood that people change. Not always for the better. Not always for the worse. But always for their own reasons. And sometimes loving someone means letting them go. Not because you stop caring, but because holding on destroys you. I placed the album back in the drawer and closed it gently. Not with anger. Not with regret. With peace. That chapter was real. That love was real. That life was real. And it had ended. Not everything that ends is a failure. Some endings are protection. Some endings are mercy. Some endings are necessary. Some endings are freedom. My ending with them was not a tragedy. It was a boundary. And boundaries saved my life. I began to trust again. Slowly. Carefully. Not blindly. Not desperately. I trusted myself first. My instincts. My voice. My feelings. My judgment. My worth. That trust became my foundation. And from that foundation everything else grew stronger. My friendships deepened. My community grew. My world became warmer. I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologizing. I stopped explaining. I stopped justifying. I simply lived. And the more I lived, the more I understood something powerful. I was never meant to disappear into other people's expectations. I was never meant to be reduced to a role. I was never meant to be consumed by other people's needs. I was meant to be whole, separate, sovereign, alive. And so I am. Fully. Completely. Honestly. And if there is one truth my life carries now, it is this. Betrayal did not destroy me. It revealed me. Loss did not end me. It freed me. Pain did not define me. It transformed me. And fear no longer controls me. I outgrew it. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose after it happened. I chose dignity. I chose courage. I chose boundaries. I chose truth. I chose myself. And I will keep choosing myself every single day I wake up in this house, in this body, in this life. Because I am not waiting for permission to exist anymore. I am not waiting for approval to live. I am not waiting for forgiveness to be free. I am not waiting for validation to matter. I matter because I breathe. I matter because I live. I matter because I am. And nothing anyone ever did to me can take that away. I am still here. And with that freedom came a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be alive. Not just breathing, not just existing, not just surviving day to day, but living with awareness, with intention, with presence. I began to feel every moment more clearly. The warmth of sunlight on my skin, the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of coffee in the morning, the weight of a blanket at night. Simple things became sacred. Ordinary moments became precious. I realized how much of my life I had spent in emotional survival mode. Constantly giving, constantly caring, constantly fixing, constantly sacrificing, until there was nothing left for me. And now, for the first time, I was living for myself without guilt, without apology, without shame, without fear. I wasn't trying to prove my worth anymore. I wasn't trying to earn love anymore. I wasn't trying to deserve peace anymore. I simply allowed myself to have it. And that changed everything. My body relaxed in ways it never had before. My mind slowed down. My thoughts became quieter. My heart felt lighter. I no longer lived in a constant state of alertness. I no longer waited for the next betrayal. I no longer expected harm as a normal part of love. I redefined what love meant to me. Love became safety. Love became respect. Love became honesty. Love became choice. Love became care without control. Love became presence without possession. Love became freedom, not fear. I stopped romanticizing suffering. I stopped glorifying endurance. I stopped believing that strength meant silence. I learned that real strength is softness with boundaries, courage with compassion, kindness with limits. I learned that being gentle does not mean being weak, and being firm does not mean being cruel. I learned that you can love people from a distance. You can forgive without forgetting. You can care without staying. You can wish someone well without giving them access to your life. I became comfortable with solitude. Not loneliness, but solitude. The peaceful kind. Where silence feels full instead of empty. Where being alone feels safe instead of scary. Where your own presence feels like enough. I no longer feared being alone because I no longer felt abandoned by myself. That was a new feeling. Powerful one. I trusted myself to protect myself. That trust became my greatest security. More than locks. I realized that the deepest betrayal I had experienced wasn't only from my children. It was from myself. From ignoring my instincts. From silencing my voice. But I forgave myself for that too. Because I did what I knew how to do with the tools I had at the time. And now I had better tools. Better awareness. Better boundaries. Better strength. Better clarity. Better vision. I became a different woman not because I hardened but because I healed. I became softer in my heart and stronger in my spine. And my house reflected that. It became lighter. Brighter. Calmer. It felt like a living thing again, not a place of tension. It felt like home in the deepest sense of the word. Not just shelter but belonging. Not just safety but peace. Not just walls but warmth. And every time I walked through my front door, I felt gratitude. Not because I owned a house but because I owned my life. I would never sign my power over to someone else. I would never shrink myself for someone else. I would never silence myself for someone else. I would never disappear for someone else. I would never erase myself for love. Never again. I am not here to be consumed. I am not here to be used. I am not here to be controlled. I am here to live, to grow, to feel. And I will live the rest of my life in that truth.